be here today. My name is Red, and I'm not going to take up too much space. I'm actually going to start by just introducing our keynote speaker for the day. Slogan. Danielle has been a leader in the international gender equity and women's empowerment movement since 2013, where alongside the NGO and the Real Girl Foundation, she co-founded Serenina, a grassroots Guatemalan girls empowerment organization. And upon moving to Canada in 2019, she joined Real Humanitarian, a Canadian organization, to co-create a customized version of the Real Girl program to fit the unique needs of their Ethiopian centers. Today, Danielle continues to be an advocate for change and equity as a coach and consultant for organizations and leaders supporting areas such as fundraising, program design, grant writing, and gender approaches. Overall, Danielle has helped secure over $2.6 million for gender and child-centered causes, co-created over 300 hours of empowerment and equity curriculum, and helped bring transformational equity and empowerment programs to over 3,000 people living in the global south. In all that she does, Danielle believes that taking a holistic approach is leading lasting change, and that we all benefit when our entire human team has the opportunity to reach their highest potential. So if you can please join me in giving Danielle a warm welcome. Thank you so much, Danielle, for being here.
Oh, awesome. That answers my question. I was going to ask if I could go no mic. So, yes, now is the opposite you prefer. Okay. Great. Thank you so much.
Is this better?
Yes.
Great. Okay. I was going to ask if I could go no mic because we're a pretty intimate group today, but I definitely want everyone online to hear. Thank you so much. I'm really honored to be here today. My name's Danielle. I'm from Medicine Hat, Alberta. Speaking with you all today. I am on mat leave, but it's really nice to kind of use a different part of my brain today, talk about things other than diapers and nap time. So I'm extra excited to be here with all of you today. I normally don't use notes when speaking, but some sleep deprivation is gonna encourage me to maybe look at my notes from time to time. Before I dive into the project that I'm going to be focusing on, I just love to give a little bit more background on myself. I am an educator by trade. I went to the University of Alberta and studied education and worked as a teacher for a very short 2 years before moving to Guatemala. I lived in Guatemala for 8 years, working with a variety of different local organizations, primarily in the field of education. It was during that time, working with some larger organizations, that the rampant need for more gender equity work and girl empowerment work very much became evident. Though I was working in educational organizations that were providing holistic support such as psychology, scholarships, food programs, we were still seeing very troubling incidents with the girls in our program. And so that's when I wanted to start focusing more directly on gender issues and girl empowerment work. The original plan was just to find a local partner that already existed in Guatemala and bring that local partner to the organizations I was already connected with. We could not quite find a local partner at that time that was open to doing that work or addressing the work in the specific communities. So alongside a group of local social workers and psychologists, I began helping coordinate some of these workshops. And unbeknownst to me at the time, that was the starting ground for co-founding an organization. Was not in the life plan, but I did end up co-founding an organization, as said, with the Real Girl Foundation, alongside a group of very dedicated local women. So I really love I love the theme, gender equity in action, because I think action's really all that we have. Having lived in Guatemala for 8 years and connecting with so many organizations that were doing absolutely transformative work and taking action every day, one of the things that I struggle with most in moving back to Canada is often when we speak about international cooperation or international work, we can get really focused on theory. We can really kind of sit in these high houses and think up these great ideas that will be so innovative and will transform things. And then you try to put them into practice when you go to countries such as Guatemala, or if you're in Rwanda or Malawi, and they just don't work. The local context is not conducive to running these programs, even things like logistics. You know, one time we made a really great PowerPoint and then did not have electricity. So I think we can get really theoretical often up here in North America. And so I really love the idea of focusing on actions. What actions can we take? And that's really my goal with all of you today, is to talk about some very actionable ideas, things that are accessible for the organizations that you are all working with. I'm so honored to share the room with so many transformative leaders and organizations that are doing great work. And my hope is that in speaking with you today, though the context I will be speaking with will probably be different than where all of you are working, that it might be able to inspire some reflection or new innovative ideas that you can bring to your organization to better support the girls and women in the area where you work, or to work to better advance gender equity. I do just want to make 2 notes. One of them was actually already shared by ACGC. The project that I will be focusing on was primarily focused on addressing issues of gender-based violence. So I will not be going into detail on any cases, but I will be speaking about gender-based violence. So thank you so much, Wayne, for addressing that. If there's ever a moment where you feel like you need to leave the room or just take some space, please know you are absolutely welcome. Additionally, our programs in Guatemala, promoting sexual and gender diversity is a key component of our program. It is actually part of our core curriculum, but we are also working in a context where very strict gender roles are very common. So we also have to recognize the reality where we are working. So you will hear me say at times groups of men or groups of women. That is shorthand for people that are identifying as men or identifying as women in those communities. We are working hard to push back on the binary approach of the situation, but that is the local context that we are working with. Let's see if I can click this. Is it just the advance button? Oh. Was that me or was that you? Oh, great. Okay, so as I said, I'm going to be sharing with you some key learnings, and I try to keep them expansive enough that they could help organizations working in different fields, but still specific enough that they're actionable. I have framed this presentation today around the key learnings from myself and the organizations I've been working with in the Global South for the past 10 years. But specifically, we did run a recent program focused on gender equity and gender-based violence in Guatemala. It was a more research-focused program with very pivotal data points, and that's also going to be a key focus of how we kind of came up with these key learnings. These are the key learnings that truly guide our work in Guatemala and have helped guide the work that we're striving to do now in Ethiopia as well. But I will go into more detail about what that looks like. But first, I just really want to quickly summarize what some of these key learnings are, because I'd like for them to be kind of in the backs of folks' mind while I'm speaking. So the key learnings that we really keep in our mind when it comes to project design and project implementation is that to truly advance gender equality, we need to include all key stakeholders, all individuals who are impacting the lives of girls and women. We really need to push back on the outdated notion that we're going to achieve gender equality or gender equity by only investing in girls and women themselves. And we need to take a bigger and broader scope, bigger and broader view of what we're looking at. Secondly, patriarchy is a deeply rooted paradigm in all these communities that we are working with. And to ensure real change, we believe that all individuals must understand the benefit in their own lives to achieving gender equity. And in short terms, that just means we need to quit thinking that everyone's going to buy into gender equity just because it's the right thing to do. And when it comes to working with all different members of the community, we find that it's incredibly important to take a restorative justice approach especially when we are realistically working with men in the communities. And statistically, they're more likely than women to be perpetrators of gender-based violence, specifically sexual gender-based violence. So the restorative justice approach has been very key to our work. And finally, the importance of taking a holistic approach and addressing the collection of issues that will be impacting gender equity issues in the community that you're serving. And I'll kind of give more context to what those mean as I go through. As I said, I will be speaking. Am I supposed to point somewhere specific? This is a fun dance.
Maybe if you point and then I'll just click at the same time.
There we go. Great. So as I said, though Real Humanitarian runs programs in Ethiopia and now Ghana as well, the specific project that I'll be speaking to did run in Guatemala through our local partner, Asociación Ser Niña. So in 2014, as mentioned, we launched Ser Niña in collaboration with a group of very dedicated local women who were primarily educators, social workers, and psychologists. And kind of just like most girl empowerment organizations at the time, we did what everyone else did. We started running workshops, after school workshops with girls and girls only. We were seeing incredible progress with these programs. We started with a 6-week program that grew to a 1-year program, which grew to a 2-year program. So girls were accessing over 160 hours of empowerment workshops. And even though we were seeing great increase in key indicators, we were still seeing a lot of challenges when the girls actually went out into the world. We'd hear them use their voices and advocate for themselves in the safety of these workshops. But what good is that if they can't actually apply that learning in their real lives? And the reality is that the girls in our program would leave our workshops and be in schools, on the streets, or in families with boys and peers that did not necessarily buy into these ideas. Not only is this less effective, we also found it to be potentially dangerous. If a girl is using her voice and advocating for herself, but then the boys in her life are not buying into that idea, we're not only going to lose some traction with the girl's progress, we could also potentially put her in danger. So in 2017, we started working with boys as well, so that every community where we were working, we were not only running workshops with girls, but we were also running workshops with the boys in the community. And then in 2020, the reality was many of our participants were victims of gender-based violence, primarily sexual gender-based violence, even though they were children. And so we recognized the need to, instead of just running empowerment workshops, also start to provide more spaces for healing and more support to the survivors of violence that we were working with. So in 2020, we received funding to finally start offering more support services to victims of violence. Not a good year to start a new program. Just let me tell you, we had some struggles with that, but really it was in some ways critical that we received the funding that year because as many of us know, rates of gender-based violence drastically increased in the global south and around the world due to the pandemic. So I kind of just want to highlight the trend here is we started very, very niche, very specific, working only with girls and doing only workshops. And quickly we realized over the first couple years the need to expand the scope. And that's really where our holistic whole family approach came in. Our local team in Guatemala, alongside the community leaders that were in the communities we were working with, the girls and boys in the program themselves, the parents of these children, were asking for a more holistic program. They wanted to learn more about what their daughters and sons were learning about in the program. The mothers themselves wanted access to the program. And we were also seeing how we were held back when we were only working with children. And then they would go home, and the reality is, in the rural communities we're working with in Guatemala, the vast majority of cases of gender-based violence do happen in the home where the perpetrator is a family member. So we saw the need to create lasting change. We needed to start working with the families, and we needed to broaden some of the services that we were providing to the families that we were serving. So that is kind of how we were led to this specific project. So thankfully, though this idea was really generated by our local team in Guatemala, here in Canada, as Real Humanitarian, we were able to apply for funds through the Fund for Innovation and Transformation through Global Affairs Canada to receive funding to test this innovative project. And the key goal was we wanted to prove that taking a more holistic, family-centered approach to gender equity would yield increased indicators of gender equity, increased indicators of women's empowerment, and also decreased rates of gender-based violence among participating families. The Fund for Innovation and Transformation really focuses on doing things differently. It focuses on testing new ideas, even if you make mistakes, learning from those mistakes. So we had never done this approach before. We had never worked with entire families, and this is a dream we had for a long time. And the Fund for Innovation and Transformation made it possible for us to do so. And so that project launched in 2021. We ran the program for 1 full year with 27 families, and that's when we were putting into practice these different approaches that I'm speaking about. So in Stephania and in Real Humanitarian, we really believe in going deep as opposed to necessarily going broad. I think there's a lot of pressure on us that work internationally to work with as many people as we can, oftentimes sacrificing the quality or the impact of our work. And for us, we really want to make sure that we're creating the most lasting and transformational change we can, even if that means going deeper and working with less individuals. Therefore, for this testing project that was very research focused, we decided to focus our efforts on one community and really go deep with those communities together, as much data as we could, and truly be able to prove this concept in a very real way. So we decided to run the program, the pilot program, this holistic family model in a community called El Hato, Guatemala. El Hato is a rural indigenous community located in the mountains of outside of Antigua, Guatemala. And it has about 3,000 people living in the community, all of whom identify as Indigenous. Though they identify as Indigenous, there has been a significant loss of culture because of their proximity to some of the larger, more urban areas. All of the families living in this community are living in situations of extreme poverty, living on less than $6 a day for the entire family. Most families are about 5 to 10 family members. And like many rural communities in Guatemala, machismo and patriarchal values are really deeply ingrained within families, individuals, and society as a whole. And that really shows in some of the key demographics of this community. For example, less than 60% of women have any source of income. And of the 50 families that we spoke to during data collection, only one woman actually had a formal form of income. The other women who did have forms of income were maybe selling tortillas or making handicrafts with a very inconsistent income daily. Additionally, 36% of the pregnancies that happened in this community did happen to teen girls. And though Stephania works with 7 different communities for the past 8 or so years in Guatemala, El Hato consistently had the highest rates of gender-based violence and sexual violence of our communities, which is another reason due to the need that we decided to focus our efforts here. An important thing to note in Guatemala, especially among the rural and Indigenous communities, is that these communities are still very impacted by the 30-year civil war that only ended in 1996. And so I think that's important context for all of the individuals, but especially one thing that we learned during this project was how much it impacted the men in the program. Many of these men were involved, were in combat, were fighting in this war, and carry a lot of trauma from what they, how they had to defend their families, how they had to defend their communities, different actions that they took during this time of deep, deep conflict. And that's something that I think, though we've been working in El Hato for many years, really did come out when we started to do deeper work with the entire families of how much the Civil War still impacts the well-being and the psyche of these individuals, predominantly the men in these communities. So what did our project actually look like? You'll hear me use the word holistic more times than you can probably count in this presentation. It was really the core piece of our testing model, but holistic can be a pretty broad term and doesn't necessarily mean anything on its own. So I'm going to kind of walk you through what holistic meant for this specific project. So first of all, we wanted to have holistic offerings. As I said, we started running initially our programs in 2014 with just, workshops working with the girls, very focused on empowerment, goal setting, human rights, sexual and reproductive health, and other themes. So we continued with those weekly workshops. We saw the value in them. The learning was really transformational. So we continued to do weekly workshops with everyone that participated in this program. However, we also recognized that in the past, we ran into some issues when the community leaders and educators did not really support or embody the ideas that we were teaching. For example, we would run a workshop on gender equity, and then during the workshops, one of the facilitators would be interrupted because the girls would get pulled out to go clean the dishes while the boys could stay in the workshop. So we saw the need to start working with the local leaders. So we began also running capacity building sessions, and I would say more collaborative sessions with the community leaders and primarily the educators of the community. We also started doing individual, family, and couple therapy. As I said, we were recognizing that just diving right into the empowerment workshops, we were running into some barriers. So we also recognized the need for deep healing at individual levels, family levels, and actually couples therapy wasn't really in the plan, but it was requested by the family. So we also started doing that as well. And then we continue to offer holistic supports for survivors of violence. So we did offer medical, therapeutic, and legal support should that be a pathway that any of the survivors of violence we were working with requested. And then we also offered gender-focused community interventions. So we did an in-depth gender scan to truly understand what would motivate people to attend, motivate people to engage in the program. And then based on the feedback we were getting from the local community, we did kind of try to follow through with some of these interventions to foster buy-in and participation. One thing that was really key and also kind of one of the innovative pieces of this model was that it was based on Mayan healing modalities. So though it's me speaking to all of you today, Sacminia really is a locally run organization. The project was designed by our local team and led by our local team. A large portion of our team actually grew up in the El Hato community itself. And all of the therapy sessions were led by Mayan healers and therapists that were using Mayan healing modalities in different ceremonies and different rituals to support this community who was Mayan as well. And it was also incorporated into our curriculum to kind of create a cohesive approach and ensure that our curriculum was moving away from just empowerment focused and also focused on healing. One more. Oh, and then we also took a restorative justice approach. So that was a through line of our entire program. Obviously, it came up more in the therapy, but especially when we were designing our curriculum for the men in the program, we did so through a restorative justice lens, working with local leaders and consultants and therapists in designing that approach. We also wanted to have a holistic reach. So, of course, we are still working with girls. They are the core focus of our organization and still remain the core focus. But to truly see an impact, we recognize the need of working with more stakeholders. So as I previously said, this program, for the first time, we were able to work with mothers and fathers. We had already been working with boys, but we continue to do so. And we started working with teachers as well. I strategically put girls at the center because I think that's a common misconception when I start talking about broadening the scope and working with more individuals, is that we're losing sight of who our key audience is and where we're trying to make the biggest difference. And for us, it still is the girls. And we believe that we can only truly support the girls by engaging with other stakeholders, but that doesn't mean that we're losing focus of our core mission. So we ran the program doing these weekly workshops and the therapy sessions for 1 full year. We would have loved to do longer, but that was the project that we ran for this year, for that year. And after running the program for a full year, we think some of the results speak for themselves. So these are the results of when we actually started working with entire families. Click. So you can go to the next one. So the cases of violence dropped by 45% among participating families. These were self-reported primarily from the women themselves about incidents of violence they would have faced in their homes. Next one. And 62% of individuals reported overcoming a situation of violence in their life. So of the individuals that reported experiencing violence before the program, 62% of them reported that a feeling of having overcome that situation of violence. And through our qualitative research, we were able to get more insight into what that looked like for them. And 79% of individuals reported experiencing less violence in their homes. And this is again data collected from all participants. So all genders, all ages of the program. And then, okay, I will read this one to you. 90% of the women who participated in the program reported taking a concrete action step towards their empowerment. So I believe 14 different women signed up for an adult literacy program, 6 different women accessed sexual and reproductive health support for the first time, 3 women started their own business, and other examples like that. That's what I mean when I say concrete example of women's empowerment. I can kind of talk about stats all day, but I don't think they really drive home true impact. So I do have a video. So if Rain, you could show the video, and it discusses the project from some of the voices that were directly involved.
Las problemáticas más observables en la comunidad del Lato tienen que ver con la violencia que hay actualmente entre hombres y mujeres y que está siendo transmitida y reproducida por los niños de la actual generación.
Los problemas acá en la comunidad de Lato son pues el acoso, el abuso sexual, y también la falta de comunicación, el liderazgo entre las mujeres, la capacidad de sentirse apoderadas.
Veo en la comunidad que es muy linda, pero a veces un poco fea, porque a veces los hombres no tienen respeto acá a las mujeres.
Through the support of the Fund for Innovation and Transformation, through Global Affairs Canada, Canadian Humanitarian, and our local partner, Asociación Ser Niña by Real Girl, we were able to launch a whole family healing program that aimed to reduce incidents of gender-based violence and increase gender equality and women's empowerment in a small Indigenous community in Guatemala. The program that we launched is innovative in a number of ways. I believe the 3 key innovations of this program were 1, working with the entire family. One of the big problems we see with programs is that they only work with the survivors of violence themselves, which can help a survivor overcome violence in their own life, but we don't see that long-term lasting change within families and communities when we're not working with all of those involved. So we wanted to work with the entire family, including oftentimes the perpetrator, to be able to see real lasting change in the rates of violence and the behaviors of the individuals in the program. Another key innovation was we did take a healing-based approach and a restorative justice approach, really working to help individuals, all of those involved in incidents of violence, to heal from past trauma, to overcome their own wounds so that they could lead healthy lives and also create healthy relationships with other individuals.
Creo que Ser Niña sabe y entiende que una persona que tiene un trauma, que ha vivido con un trauma, que su cuerpo lo ha atravesado, entonces está bloqueada y no puede asumir el poder personal, el empoderamiento.
And another key innovation was our work with boys and men. That is a foundational aspect of all that we do at Ser Niña and Real Girl, and it continued to be a foundational aspect of this project. We believe that we can't achieve real change in terms of gender equality if we're not including everyone in the conversation.
Siempre hemos creído firmemente que para lograr verdaderamente la igualdad de género, debemos incluir a niños y hombres. La dura verdad o la dura realidad de Guatemala es que la gran mayoría de los incidentes de violencia tienen perpetradores masculinos, por lo que para terminar realmente con la violencia de género, debemos trabajar con los propios hombres porque si no, de lo contrario, pues solo estamos abordando el síntoma y no la causa desde la raíz.
Really, the impacts that we've seen from the program, even though it only lasted a year, were truly tremendous. We've seen key indicators of change in the rates of violence within the home. Over 50% of those that we interviewed that were experiencing violence before the program say they are no longer experiencing violence. The biggest shifts were in rates of physical violence and emotional violence. Also, almost all of the participants reported that they feel safer in their homes and in their daily lives after participating in the program. Additionally, some key changes are the empowerment and advancement of women. That's really been one of the biggest results of the program, is the women taking action in their own lives. We have many of the women that are now accessing sexual and reproductive health support for the first time. Our therapist is accompanying them to a sexual health clinic, and for many of them, they've never been there before. Another example is over 22 women of the 26 women total have signed up to be part of a community leadership program to help lead community change. Additionally, there are also women that have signed up to finish their education through an adult literacy program, and also women that have requested to get training for entrepreneurship and to hopefully open their own business one day.
Para mí fue muy importante aprender, pues, cómo yo puedo prosperar, cómo yo me puedo sentir apoderada de mí misma. Mis planes y mis sueños para mi futuro es, así como yo recibí el apoyo, también ser capacitada para apoyar también a más familias de mi comunidad.
Cuando yo no había entrado, todavía no tenía conocimiento sobre esto, yo era un hombre malo, más claro, ¿verdad? Que yo sí me gustaba mucho pegarles a mis hijos. Y esto es lo que me hace a mí ser mucho. Y cada vez que me acuerdo, ahorita es lo mismo otra vez. Yo le llevé mala vida a mis cosas, no tuve tanto guaro y eso yo le soltaba a ella, lo pegaba y mis hijos pagaban el plato por mi causa. Así cuando aparecieron esta discusión, ellos me empezaron a darme, ¿cómo le llaman eso? Como psicológico, y pues en los tiempos que yo he estado viviendo y todo esto, pues sí me ha servido de mucho, pero de mucho, créanme, de mucho. Porque cada vez que yo salía aquí, yo llegaba y así empezaba a ver, y empezaba a practicar lo que yo miraba. Y mis hijos también, pues, así de que este programa me ha sido mucho. También para mí.
Entre los impactos que este proyecto ha tenido en la comunidad de Lato está que ellos y ellas tienen la oportunidad ahora de mirarse como personas que tienen la capacidad de construir su propia realidad, de mirar hacia adentro, reconociendo que tienen capacidades, dones, fuerzas, misiones que les permiten encontrar una vida digna y también tener relaciones saludables con sus esposos, esposas, con sus hijos, con sus vecinos. También entre las jovencitas, ahora ellas pueden reconocerse como mujeres que son de una generación en la que tienen mayor capacidad de toma de decisiones, mayor capacidad de lograr lo que quizás sus abuelas y sus madres no fueron capaces de alcanzar, y de expandir su visión hacia algo diferente y hacia algo mejor en cuanto a su calidad de vida.
Aprendí que no tenemos que ser calladas y que tenemos que alzar la voz y ser muy valientes por cualquier cosa que venga.
One of the key goals of this program was to start a movement that then can be taken over by the community, and we are so proud and inspired to say that that truly has happened. Though we will continue to work with the community in many ways moving forward, this chapter of this whole family healing program is closing, but we're actually able to see the community members themselves take it on themselves. We have men that are interested in becoming healers themselves after going through the program. We have women that are interested in running their own workshops based on what they learned. So we really have seen what it can look like when we help plant a seed, but now the community is really letting everything grow. And that's our biggest hope as an organization, is to work in collaboration with the community and really understand what their needs are and support them in achieving their needs. And most importantly, letting them be the leaders of change. And that's something that I think brings all of us great joy and inspiration, is really seeing these participants now truly step up as the leaders, and we can't wait to see all the things that they're going to create and change in the future.
Thanks so much, Rain. So yeah, I really love using that video and hearing more from the voices of the individuals themselves.
Advertise on YouTube.
Yeah, don't worry about it. You saw some of the staff speak who are local to the community, and also some of the participants themselves. Kind of in wrapping up, for me, as I said, I really, don't want to just focus on like how this project worked for us, but some of the key takeaways that are hopefully a bit more expansive and can support the incredible work that everyone here is already doing, whether it's internationally or locally as well. So, can I just get the next key takeaway up? So the first one, just coming back to it, is that all individuals who are impacting the world of a girl must be involved, not just the girls themselves. So we really realized previous to this program, but through this program, we could really prove that the indicators in the girls themselves were vastly improved when we actually started working with this and with more community members. And the reality is that these girls do not live in a bubble. They do live in a community of people of other gender identities, of other communities and groups. And to ignore that, we are really putting at risk their well-being. And what we find at Real Humanitarian, Real Girl, and Step Niña is that to not work more holistically with all key stakeholders is not only putting at risk the empowerment of these girls, but truly could be putting at risk their lives. So the critical need of also working with the other individuals involved. And then also that patriarchy is a deeply rooted long-standing paradigm, and to ensure real change, everyone needs to understand how it benefits their own lives. I think there's this outdated notion that it's just the right thing to do, so everyone's going to buy into this, right? And it's just not true. To be honest, we really struggled to get the fathers to engage in this program. We had 27 families that were fully involved in the program, but we did originally canvass 50 families. For the first men's workshop, one person showed up out of 50. One man showed up out of 50. So, and that's because we were really just saying, come to this workshop. It's good for your daughters. It's good for your wives. So this is your duty as a husband to show up. And we really didn't see much impact. By the end of the program, we did have over half of the participating families' fathers were engaged. And that was because we started to shift the narrative. We started to talk to them about how they would also benefit if they could invest in the girls and women's in their lives. And we need to create conversations where people can truly realize the authentic benefit that comes to them personally and how it could reduce their own suffering if they are taking better care of the girls and women in their lives, and how their families can benefit not only socially and emotionally, but financially when girls go to school and when women have access to opportunities, and how not only their families, but how their entire community will thrive if we start engaging the entire population. And next one was seeking to bring about true healing and lasting change in regards to gender-based violence. We found the restorative justice approach to be critical. This is kind of tied to my point number 2, is part of the reason the men didn't originally show up is because they told us they didn't just want to get lectured and told everything that they were doing wrong and having no space to share some of their own experiences. So that's when we started taking a restorative justice approach to truly understanding their experiences and bringing that into the conversation as well. And really moving away from this crime and punishment approach. I think history shows us that it doesn't work. We've been doing it for hundreds, if not thousands of years, and gender inequality and gender-based violence persists. So we need to take a different route. Additionally, we found that I think there's this notion that restorative justice is really only focused on the perpetrator. And in our work, we strongly disagree with that. We think that it is still very and needs to be very survivor-centered. And in fact, when we actually started looking at it, of the 62 cases of violence that we addressed during this program, only one requested legal action. The 61 others were very, very clear that they did not want to pursue legal action against the perpetrators. Instead, they wanted to bring about accountability. And the reality is that punishment does not bring about accountability. Conversations, healing, discussions is what could bring about this change in a very safe environment with professionals, which is a very key point. So we really started to see real change there. And also when we started working with men, we were also really able to learn their experiences of violence as well. The reality is many of the men that were involved in the program reported being victims of sexual-based violence themselves when they were children. And almost all of them reported being physically abused when they were children as well. And though that doesn't equate the realities that girls go through, it's still trauma that they were holding in themselves. And I think that the old saying holds true, is that hurt people. And that's why we're seeing these generations of violence, is because people are living in their own trauma and in their own pain. And without the tools and skills and healing to overcome that, are perpetuating these cycles of violence. And additionally, as previously mentioned, not only did many of these men experience violence as children, many of them experienced and were involved with very traumatic incidents of violence and war crimes during the Civil War, which very much impacted their sense of well-being and their ability to communicate and interact in healthy ways. So we found that the restorative justice approach was very critical, not only in engaging the men, but also in seeing real change in the relationships and the feelings of safety among the women. And then finally, the holistic approach was really critical to addressing the collection of issues impacting gender equity. So as I kind of said at the start, when Stephanie started, we were really just doing empowerment workshops and realized that we were seeing some change, but not quite enough. And we needed to really expand the scope. And for us in this specific project, that meant really incorporating more healing-based activities. In fact, I would argue that we can't have true empowerment if healing is not in the conversation. Maybe we'll see some change for a short period of time, but if the women or the girls that we're working with are still holding trauma in themselves, it's very hard to take that action they need to in their lives to create lasting change. So the first step was really realizing the importance of helping individuals heal from past trauma to then be able to take empowered actions. And that's now a key part of our model. Additionally, when it comes to empowerment, that's also a very vague word, we firmly believe that it's important that we address the collections of issues that they're facing, and those issues should be identified by the community themselves. So for example, one of the issues that became very, very clear in this project was the need for increased sexual and reproductive health programs. We've always ran sexual and reproductive health education programs, but never offered supports or visits. And we really recognize that need. So we recognize the need to take a more holistic approach, to offer more services to see real impact. And speaking of sexual and reproductive health, this is kind of the most clear way that I can explain it, is we can talk to girls, if we're only doing sexual and reproductive health, and girls and boys that understand the importance of using contraception, but they don't have the voice to actually advocate for themselves in a situation, what good is that information? So we really saw the need to have a much more holistic approach into the content that we were teaching and the approaches that we were using. We really, in the project in Ethiopia, they had already been doing a holistic approach. They had already been offering scholarships, social and emotional support, family support as well. And that really was seen as critical to truly see real empowerment. Workshops on their own are not enough if the girls can't go to school. That, knowing that school is important versus actually being able to attend school. So really having a holistic approach. And in that, I'm not saying that you should do everything. I would actually argue against that. I think it's important we focus on what we do well, but finding local partners that do that. We did not become a sexual and reproductive health program, but we did find a local partner who would fill that need for our organization. We do not have the capacity to offer scholarships, but we're currently in negotiations with a local organization that might be able to offer some scholarships. And just, I think my goal in sharing these is that maybe there'll be one or two or half of one that might impact the work that you're doing, that might be relevant to the work that you're doing. And I would just love to foster some reflection and discussion about how some of these could impact your work. I know not everyone's working directly in the gender equity space, but really everything is in the gender equity space. Gender inequality affects everything that we do. There is not one global issue that is not impacted by gender inequality. So kind of keeping these in mind, even if it's a water-based program, is there anything from here that can hopefully support your work? And not just that, I really look forward to hearing questions and ideas and hearing the learnings from all of your incredible work throughout the day as well. I think that pretty much wraps up what I wanted to say. I have no idea how I'm doing for time, but I just want to say I'd love to chat more one-on-one. That is how I do best. So come and find me. Because of a newborn baby, I'm not sure how much of the speed networking I'll be here for, but find me at lunch or during the breaks, and I'd love to chat more.
And we have about 10 minutes for questions, so I'm just going to open it up to the floor if anyone has any questions. I have some of my own, but and if anyone online to ask questions, we have time for that.
Danielle, I'm interested in your incorporation of Mayan healing principles. Can you give us some examples of how you exactly use that?
Yeah, definitely. So as I said, all of the workshops were led by local Indigenous healers and therapists, as well as all the therapy sessions. So some of the examples of using the healing modalities, as I mentioned, there was a significant loss of culture, loss of pride and identification with the Ketchikel culture, which is where we were working. Because of the proximity to rural, more urban centers, and a lot of discrimination against Indigenous communities in Guatemala that exists. So a key part of the healing was not only individual healing, but also collective healing and reconnecting the individuals with a sense of pride and deep connection to their Indigenous traditions and heritage. So we did that through the therapists doing different rituals with the individuals, different ceremonies. So teaching the women of the groups and the children how to use different ceremonies for different moments that they might be going through in their life. So different ceremonies that can be used for when you're very angry, or when you're mad at the world, or ones for celebration, or ones when you're seeking out peace with a different person. So using different ceremonies for specific events. Also using the Mayan cosmovision and using the Nahual, so kind of their Mayan sign, to find a sense of healing and connection. So actually all the individuals were connected with their different Nahual, so their Mayan sign, to be able to find healing in that way. There was also different breathwork practices that were incorporated into the program. And actually one of our healers also worked with gardening and connection to the earth. So actually through different gardening and earth connection activities were some of the other examples as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was such a brilliant presentation and such a great work, very impressive. And so much connected to the work many of us, and I'm doing in my region. I'm in gender equity work and gender justice work. And I particularly appreciate how you got local context and empowering locals into that in your practice. This is a very, we all know about it, it's a very common challenge, I would say. When you said that this was the project for 1 year. So then I said, here you go, now what are you going to do? Because you would like, and I'm sure you would also like, and the team would like to do more, and to long-term connection and long-term commitment to make it more sustainable. But you said that our locals are taking up on that, and they are doing, which is great. I just wondered if you have any comment on Are you still in touch with them? Are there any plans to continue this project? And I like how you said it, that instead of getting wider, we are going deeper. And this is the way to go, to target a particularly small community and work with that, but how sustainable it is. And are you looking into like a long term, like here in that area?
Thank you for the question. I'm happy to have the opportunity to speak on that. So yes, so we received funding from the Fund for Innovation and Transformation to run the project for 1 year. We had been working in El Hato since 2014. We continue to be there every single week. Our organization has not left the community. That specific project has technically wrapped, but actually something that I should have shared that I haven't is because we saw the incredible impact of this approach, we are now actually using this approach in all of our communities. So we are continuing we are no longer just working with the girls. We are actually now using this whole family approach as our core model in all of our communities, as much as we have the financial capacity to do so. So we are still in the community of El Hato. We run workshops there, I believe, every single Friday with over 150 children. And the therapists visit that community still twice a week. So we are still very much involved in the community. That specific research project was 1 year. As far as sustainability, yes, we've made long-term commitments to these communities. We are very excited to see how more and more it's less maybe Ser Niño doing a lot of the movement building and then more the local community taking it up, local women's groups, local leaders, starting to take more and more ownership and leadership in the program. But it's, the reality is in the not-for-profit international sector, we're still working to fund everything, grant writing, fundraising. So that's definitely, I think, I'm sure, speaking to the choir of the challenges that we're facing right now as far as sustainability. But sustainability in the sense of the community taking up and our team continuing to be dedicated to this community and all the communities we've been in is very, very present. Thanks for the question.
Thank you. You spoke a great deal about restorative justice. I was wondering if you could please flesh that out a little bit more for us. What is your vision of restorative justice? How did it work out in the community? Thank you very much.
Thanks for the question. So when we were looking at restorative justice, we really were working with our local professionals and the local Guatemalan individuals who were running the program to what does restorative justice look like in this Guatemalan context? Because we have different views of it up here. But really it was bringing together those involved in situations potentially of violence, if the survivor of violence felt safe, to create conversations that would promote the healing of that individual and really to build accountability. I think that's where there's some misconception is restorative justice, now I just have a conversation and nothing else happens. How great, Restorative justice does not necessarily mean that punishment doesn't exist, does not mean that legal action might not also be taken if that is the pathway that the survivor of violence or their family chooses. But really creating spaces where individuals can share, and specifically the survivor of violence can, in a safe way, discuss and open up about how the incidents impacted her, and kind of creating a sense of humanity and connection between that person and the perpetrator, so the perpetrator can truly understand the impact that their actions had on that person to hopefully create lasting change among that person. Because I think the reality is the objectification of girls and women is really real. And that's one thing that we realized is that, for lack of a better term, the perpetrators of violence truly just didn't connect to how much their actions were actually negatively impacting individuals. It's been so normalized in Guatemala and in so many countries that we forget that, oh, this is actually having a real impact. So creating conversations where the perpetrators of violence can truly understand the traumatic, deeply negative impact that they were having on individuals, and creating spaces. And it's hard to summarize because it looked different, because we were very survivor centered of what that looked like. Sometimes in restorative justice cases, we've had individuals that just wrote a letter. They absolutely did not feel comfortable speaking face to face. We have had individuals that speak face to face because the reality is oftentimes the perpetrators of violence were the husbands. So they're speaking face to face with these individuals every day, but it was just creating a space where the conversation could be about past trauma and past pain. So that's really the approach that we took towards restorative justice. We felt that it did have but the women reported an increased impact. Actually, we had more women come to us and report incidents of violence than ever before. We've been in the community for 8 years, and reporting of gender-based violence was very low because there was this fear of what's going to happen to my family. Are you going to tear my family apart? And so when there was actually an opportunity where they could seek healing and seek accountability, but not feel like their family was torn apart, it really did open the doors for much more reporting, and therefore we could step in and support a lot more, get more therapists in with the families, whereas beforehand we received much more limited reports, so we could never provide those families with the support they needed. There's very much a silencing of violence in these communities, and by offering a restorative justice approach, we found that it actually did kind of break down some walls of silence that had historically been there for a long time. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Daniela. I think we have a question from the online audience. Yes, we do. I'm gonna just wait it out here really quick. Okay, so I'm wondering, Mona is asking, I'm wondering if your project has impacted any of the local policies or laws or other public health programs that have the same interest and focus ending gender violence.
Great question. Honestly, no. We are a small grassroots organization. Policy is not one of our key focus areas, so we just haven't been able, indirectly, hopefully, have we shifted some perspective of some local leaders who might down the way use their voice? That would be the hope. But are there any direct reflections in actual concrete policy at regional, national levels? No, we are involved in a number of different advocacy groups that allow us to amplify our voice for policies. We actually have a leadership seat in a sexual and reproductive health national council. We're also very involved with Girls Not Brides, so just to amplify our voice by working with other organizations. But no, that's not a key focus area for us. If we had more time and more funds, it would be.
Okay.
Thanks for the question.
Right, well, thank you, Danielle, and thank you so much, everyone. That's all the time we have for Q&A today. Hopefully, if anyone go there, to Danielle and connect that way. And I'm going to hand it over back to Wayne to kind of introduce the next portion of our program.
Note, I'm actually going to turn off this microphone and we'll fully switch.
I think so. Let's sit with you. Is it off as well? Yes. All right, so I'd love to invite our amazing panelists up. We have Dr. Jamal. You three get to complete these. Gloria, come on up. Alicia, come on up. You've read their bios before. Part of why you came to hear about their incredible work. How sick does it make yourself comfortable? That's it. We'll introduce, actually, I'm not even going to introduce them. As I much prefer to do, our amazing panelists are going to introduce themselves. So as you've already read their bios, we've got some incredible folks here. But part of what we're doing here is really talking about how our work in seeking gender equity really requires this whole community approach. But as I'm sure you've noticed, just from what
It's not
picking up.
Now they can't hear you.
Oh, that's so odd.
I'm so sorry. Give us just one moment. So.
Testing, 1, 2. No?
Should we do the pass? We might.
Are you passing the microphone? I'm not gonna hold the mic. So I'll hold one mic for now, but I'm gonna talk.
All right, so never mind the nice projection. They know, sorry, maybe keep the other one as well. Grand, thanks so much. We'll pass it along. Oh. Amazing. All right, sorry, everybody online. Thank you so much, everybody, for your patience. So, I know you've read the amazing speaker bios already, but I wanted to ask everybody on the panel to introduce themselves a little bit. Before I go into that, though, the reason why these folks are up here and why they're here to share is because we were talking about that whole community approach to gender equity and how we can, and gender equity being equity for all genders. And how when we do this kind of work and when you have a whole of community approach, how essential it is to work in context and really pay attention to what is happening in the community and be community-centered and community-led. And what's remarkable about these three speakers who are going to be sharing their experiences is that they come to all of this work from such beautifully different places and have such an incredibly nuanced perspective on how that functions within their context. I'm really excited. So without further ado, I'd actually ask if you can share a little bit about yourself and how you came to your work. And we decided that we're going to do this conversational style, but I would say that Amir, you've got the mic first. Would you be willing to start us off?
Taking the mic first word.
Sorry.
Okay, thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here and such a great conversation already earlier during the day. I'm so excited about it. And I already learned so much. So my name is Amir Jamal, and I'm associate professor at the Faculty of Social Work, University of Calgary, and coordinating the graduate program in international social development, and also working for the faculty in global engagement. You read probably the introduction is there, but this is not my favorite introduction. My favorite introduction is coming now, and that is that I am a community worker. I am a social worker, and I was born and raised in Peshawar, my beautiful city Peshawar, on the border of Afghanistan in Pakistan. And throughout my youth, probably in the 18th century, throughout in my youth time, I was a community worker, and I lived and lived in a war or a war-like situation in my youth time. I remember that when there was war started in Afghanistan, when Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan, and then there was Cold War going on. I'm talking about 80s, 90s, right? Up to 2000, it's still going on, the war. So I was a young guy. And there was a lot, misery, oppression, violence, women misery, children, in my town, because I was on the border, I was looking at it, all that. I experienced that, I witnessed that. Somehow, I was lucky, I was having some good friends at that time. So instead of going the other way, instead of filling my heart with hatred, with violence, with bitterness, with revenge, I chose the other way, the meaningful way, I would say the better, beautiful way. And that was to use my energy for my purpose, not to get into this bitterness, not to fill my heart with all that. And we, as few friends, work with the community. We say, okay, this what's going on. On the bus stops, children without shoes, without proper clothing, women standing, nowhere to go. They just ran a war. They burned their villages, they just ran out. They are in my town. What to do with them? We, some friends, work with local community. And we said, we didn't know about it, what it's called. Now I know about it a little bit. It's called social work, or it's called development work, or humanitarian work. We did not know. We just started working with the community, going door to door. We want to help these children, these women. And the community opened their door. They say how much we want a room for them. We want a blackboard, a chalk. I don't know if young people would know about blackboard. Now these are a whiteboard, right? We want some food for them. We want some clothing for them. These are Afghan refugees, children, because the world at that point didn't know about it. Not much about it. They came very later. There was no funding or anything. Nobody was there. Even UNHCR and all, nothing was there. They were just people and misery and violence and abuse. And we worked with them. We thought we will have just in one village a small center we established. We will talk about it later on, but this is introduction, so just want to share this with you. And it worked amazingly because the community noticed the sincerity in these young folks. They came together, they embraced us. Unbelievable, the support we received from community. If they were having 2 pieces of bread, they say, you take 1. They were not rich, their heart was rich. And and it was amazing. I still remember those children. Now they are big guys, some of them are married now. Those little children, those centers, flourishing, loving. They loved us so much. They loved, and I loved them so much. The power of love was there. Their kindness was there. Care for each other was there, right? And then we made 42 centers. And it was going on and on, and we were all very much involved. So anyway, so that was basically my first initiative. This is my introduction. The introduction that I love the most. Building on that, then I started working on various avenues, which we will discuss later. I don't want to take more time here now, but we worked on that. And then with that experience, then I was involved in many other projects. So there's more than 25 years of experience. I did my PhD based on the same lens, same context. And finally, I would say that I wrote the first book in the region on this topic, which I called The Gatekeepers, Engaging Men for Gender Justice and Girls' Education in Pashtun. And I articulated how to do that and how we did it, shared my stories in that. And that book was then translated in local language and became a foundation for a social movement engaging men for gender justice. And we recently had conferences and organization established a foundation for that about 13 years ago for girls' education in the region, conflict-affected region, same girls and orphans living with single moms. And for them, we are established education and trying to have, as earlier presenter said, a holistic model, which we will talk about it later. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, ACGC, for inviting Rarika into this space. It's such an honor to come and just have these amazing conversations and just to share the work that Rarika Now does. So my name is Gloria Aniva. I'm the Executive Director of Rarika Now. And Rarika Now is a non-for-profit organization that supports Black LGBTIQ newcomers and refugees in Canada. And our work majorly focuses on promoting the rights of these newcomers and refugees, and also raising awareness about the gaps and challenges that the newcomers experience. For me, it's been a privilege because you get to do work that also shares your lived experience, also to get to do work that you're passionate about, that when you wake up every morning,
and you see newcomers and refugees walking into the office, that there's reason of hope, that there's a better tomorrow for them, because most of them have fled their home countries, because they fled their home countries because of discrimination, persecution, hate, and when they come to Canada, they know that Canada is a safe haven. But surprisingly, there's so many gaps. There are so many gaps that are there that need to be addressed. So Rarika now is in that spotlight to raise those gaps and challenges. Yeah, thank you so much.
Hi, everyone. My name is Elisa Sukamaki. I am the National Director of FGM Canada Network, which stands for Female Genital Mutilation Canada Network. So just so we're all on the same page, FGM/C for cutting stands for the partial or total removal of the external genitalia of a female for non-medical reasons. So this is a human rights violation. This is child abuse. This is illegal in Canada. It has been in our criminal code since 1997. It's absolutely a product of gender inequality and a tool of patriarchal violence. And so the work of our network is to bring stakeholders together, individuals with lived experience and survivors and researchers, to create a network within Canada that can provide accurate services to survivors and help identify girls at risk. So really, we're at the beginning of this fight in Canada, but similar, we have a long way to go. We have a lot of gaps.
Thank you all so much. And again, it's remarkable because I think that why we're all coming into this space, and we can all realize that we've got three very different organizations and really three very different perspectives on how to address gaps in gender equity and our work, and how it is deeply, how all of our work is interconnected, because the work of Erica now is supporting newcomers and refugees. If our world was actually creating a space of equity all around the world, what do we need the same situation here? And the FGM has to work internationally and locally, because our situations, our realities are everywhere. And you bring your expertise here, and we know that working as a whole of community approach is absolutely required in every work that we do. So I just would that all of you are here today. So what I'd really like to ask, and to sort of borrow off of Amir's beautiful storytelling as well, is I'd love to hear a story. If you've got a story that you would like to share about a whole of community approach that you've brought to your work to supporting gender equity. So if you've got one, take a moment.
As we all know, we all are involved. So many stories we have, right? So we need to choose a story among the stories. Yeah, I would like to share this based on the work about men engagement and community engagement in gender justice. I will take you again back to about a couple of 1,000 miles away from here, on the border of Afghanistan and Pakistan. You know, that patriarchy is there, as discussed earlier. Those issues are there. And equity issues, of course, are there. And those gender roles are there, right? In some places, there is some improvement, but in some places, women are considered lesser than men, right? That's what I witnessed when I was growing up as a young guy. So, and men would be basically, now the society I'm talking about is like rural and tribal, basically mainly. In city areas, there is significant improvement, but rural and tribal societies, the girls' education issue is a major thing. They are not sending their daughters to school. So, in that region, a man stood up in a village, and he was a different man than others. He was a tribal man, and that man said, you know, I would treat my daughters equally as my sons. They will eat the way my sons eat. They will dress the way my sons dress. That one man, and I know that man, and I know many of them. So that man start sending his daughters to school. They arrange a tanga. I don't know the horse buggy, right? We call it tanga. He will arrange the horse buggy for his daughters, and they will go to school. The community resisted. Uncles resisted. You are sending a daughter, a girl will go to school, other men want to see her. What are you doing? This is our tradition. This is against this. He stood it. No. And he would say, these are my sons, if you are thinking like this. So a tribal man stood up for girls, for his daughters' education. And the world changed for daughters. Because a man was standing for them. Those 3 daughters got education. I still remember the school was Lady Griff Public School in Peshawar. One of their daughter, when she got educated, she became a school teacher. She got passionate about education. And then she started teaching for more than 25 years, 26 years. I witnessed their daughter. And their daughter is my mom. And that man was my grandfather. The first woman in the tribe, in the family to be educated. She became the role model. I'm sitting here in front of you, my friends, because of that woman. She got passionate about education. She went to a far village, a mud-made school, I remember as a child. Sometime I will go with her. And educating girls. She was a teacher, a mentor, a counselor, a healer for the whole village. Because she was educated. Because a man stood with her. She changed the society. Many other girls got educated. I have so many stories to share, but those are in my book also. I share that how those girls will treat me. Oh, I'm her son, right? So I witness the power of knowledge then gained by a woman and the dignity and power of a man when he stands with a woman for justice, gender justice, and girls' education. So this is what I witnessed as a child, as a youth. And I realize through my research and my practice, particularly in those communities and everywhere in some ways, that unless a man stand up and become a strong ally with women for gender justice and girls' education, we cannot achieve it. I realized and I see after in my youth age, when I got involved in mainstream development work, millions of dollars are wasted because communities are not engaged, because men are not engaged, because holistic approaches are not there. So this is the story that I have seen. And this is just one story. In my work, tons of stories and reminding me again that it's critically important to engage the community, to take their wisdom, embrace their wisdom. They do know what are the issues. They do know what are the solutions, but we need to respectfully engage them and go to them as a learner, not as a teacher, and expand our hands for the wisdom that they have for the community. So this is what I learned throughout. And this is what I'm doing. I'm trying to following that engaging respectfully community, learning from them, respecting them, loving them, and then working with them for all those issues, including gender justice and girls' education.
Right, did one of you wanna jump in?
I just wanted to jump off and say that, similarly, so FGM Canada, we're a really exciting time in that Canada's at the beginning of the FGM movement. So other continents and countries are far, far, far ahead of us. And where we come to today is based on the stories and the lived experiences of survivors, having the bravery to come forward because we acknowledge them as being the experts in their own lives and we listen to them. They came to us and said, we need to have an organization where we're not. So you can imagine you come to Canada with your whole family and you may have language barriers, you may have some economic barriers, and you have health and mental health barriers due to the consequences of FGM, which can be severe. And as women, we know our bodies change over time and the impacts of FGM can complicate that and can lead to death in some cases. So you come to this country where FGM is not well known and you now have to advocate for everything for yourself. You know, if you want therapy, you have to explain to your therapist what happened to you. If you want to go see a doctor, you have to justify, unfortunately, why this happened to you. It is a nightmare. So we've taken the time to connect with these women. We're listening to them. We are survivor-led, and we're starting at the beginning. And we get to take all the lessons learned from all the other countries and organizations that are doing incredible work on this issue. And we get to start strong. We get to start with those women. So for us, it's not the story of one, it's the story of a handful, because there's a lot of silence around FGM and these women have a lot of pressure in their communities not to talk about it. So for us, it's the story of these very strong women coming forward and saying, enough is enough. We are Canadian, we're here, this is happening to our girls, and we need to make change. And so I hear that, I hear the power in your story, and I see the power in giving women the skills, the platform that they need to make that difference. And that's what we need to be doing. And I like your line about not being teachers, being listeners. And I think that's everything.
Yeah, I think for me is just to add on what my two colleagues have shared about the power of community ownership, allowing the refugees to just share their lived experience in safe and inclusive spaces, you know, like there's so much intersectionality that comes with being Black, being too LGBTQ, being a refugee. So having that platform, having that space that is safe for us to share our lived experiences, share our sacred stories, you know, there's so much power in that, you know. Yeah, and also being invited to just being part of making policies, you know. Policies are made, but those that have lived experience are not on those tables. They are left out, and it's a struggle, like you say, when you go even to access services, you have to explain yourself. Already you're coming in with so much trauma, but you have to explain yourself, and it's really not a friendly and inviting space. So just having spaces that are safe and allowing the refugees to just share their sacred stories in a very friendly way. Yeah, thank you.
So it's so powerful to hear what you're sharing as well about having those safe spaces to share, and then also finding solidarity and allyship and being able to actually move ahead and make the changes, because none of the work can be done alone. And that we, in whatever our work is around gender equity, that we have to stand alongside or have somebody stand with us wherever we are in terms of our positionality on the journey. Is really powerful, because in every context that seems to be essential, no matter where we are in the world. So thank you so much for sharing all of these things. I think something that I'd love to hear from as well is about this idea of working together
but around some of the challenges around your work that you shared about some of these, but how are you overcoming them? Or what are some of the ways that you are bringing people alongside or bringing them into the journey, not while you're centering survivors and community? How are you getting the men to join the conversation? How do you bring allies into the conversation around ending FGM or actually supporting to us LGBTQIA plus Black newcomers and refugees, and also supporting them through all of their work? Do you have any stories that you would be open to share?
So yeah, our biggest challenge, honestly, with the work that we're doing is that there is a tremendous amount of fear and silence. So I would say the average Canadian doesn't want to get involved in FGM/C work because they perceive it as a cultural or religious part of somebody's life. Again, like Danielle was saying, it's about reframing that narrative. It's about reminding people that this is a human rights violation and this is about child abuse, and letting people know that it is their responsibility to have those conversations and to jump in if you see a girl at risk. When I talk to a lot of Canadians, they're really fearful that if they take any action on this, they're going to be deemed as racist. So it's really about talking about the impacts that this has on a girl and having really candid conversations. If this was something happening to quote unquote Canadian girls and we didn't see it as an other issue, would we allow this to happen? You know what I mean? And really shaking people up. So it's hard because it is so sensitive and we do have a lot of pushback. But like Danielle said, we have to shift it and we have to talk about the bigger picture, and it is about harm.
Yeah, from my perspective, I think it's having the uncomfortable conversations. Like recently, I would like to share about the influx of refugees that came in from Uganda after the bill was passed. The bill is so harsh, and so many have had, like, they have to leave, they have to find a safer place. So like having conversations about housing is a challenge. We really need to do something. We really need to have those kind of conversations with the stakeholders, with the influencers. Yeah, it's uncomfortable, but we really have to have those conversations. And like you said, we cannot do it on our own. We need to collaborate with other organizations, other stakeholders. So we call in other members to support and see that the refugees have a good life and they're able to thrive in Canada. Yeah.
Yes, in the similar note, as you already mentioned about the challenges, right? All these challenges that we are facing in the field. But like one particular thing is that, as you guys mentioned about the disconnect that we see, a disconnect between social realities and development policies. Social realities on ground, like when we say in social work term, where the client is at. It's very important, I realize that how to fill this disconnect. It's important to be aware about the context, the particular context we are dealing with, and our people who we are serving, where they are at this particular point, their cultural context, their faith-based context, all those, their ethnic context. So it's very important that, and what we do is basically, when I started working on engaging men for girls' education and gender justice in general, through my research in the field, I always found almost in every village and town, some men, even if they are like, there are 100 men, there are 5 or 10 men who reject existing rigid gender norms, who realize that this is not right, what we men are doing with women. This is not just. I call them beautiful men in my in my different articles and talks. I call them those beautiful men. So I begin with those beautiful men. I go to village, I begin with those men. And I build on those beautiful men. Right? And there are many stories that how they accomplished amazing work when there was a little bit of facilitation. So the process I follow is basically beginning with those beautiful men and building on what they have already and looking into their context and respecting their faith-based context, their culture-based context, and begin our work with them. And I have amazing successes in that note, that when I respected that context, and I try to understand that context, and I empower local community of doing their things, and particularly when I would talk to men, and when I start talking about what's in it for you, Mr. Man, what's in it for you, not for girls, not for women, not for anybody else. How important it is that your daughter get educated. How important it is for you, for your children, and for your generation that you don't have violence at home. How violence at home can impact violence at society and violence at state level. So how it's critical for you when you start listening about it and then start working. And I remember in many times this happened. I had a talk about gender justice, girls' education, and young men will, after the talk, will come to me from the community. How we can support, how we can help in our own village, how you can facilitate. So when I go with the community-based approach, when I go with the indigenous-based approaches, when I go with local context in mind, and when I go with sincerity, trust building, and long-term commitments, the community open their arms and embrace us beautifully. And then the work is effectively done.
Thank you so much. Thank you, all three of you, so much for all of your sharing. I am sure that there are some folks in the room who probably have some questions as well about your work, or maybe in the Zoom room. I don't know if anybody has any questions for our panel, knowing that we're already at 1 o'clock or almost 1 o'clock in this time zone. So yeah, we'll hold a little space for questions if anybody. Were there any online? Not yet. Grand. Does anybody have any questions in the room? Sadia?
That happens. Thank you so much for the panelists. This question is for you, Dr. Amal. Just curious to know, how is it that you're applying or talking about taking action locally here with the communities in Calgary? What does that look like for you here? Also, want to talk about, and I guess a follow-up to that question is keeping the intersectionality of religion and culture in mind, and the paradigms that go with that. How are you sustaining that in Afghanistan and Pakistan with the current environment that's happening there as well?
Huge two questions. Okay, let me try to be brief as much as I can. These are two. Thank you. It's a great question and huge. Locally, you said locally in Calgary. So what I do, and I should not use the term I, it's we basically. I'm just facilitating. So what we do here is with my colleagues and our students and amazing community workers. What we do is we try to just quickly an example of the work. Men, Pashtun men, coming from wars, conflicts. A lot is going on, lots of baggage. Those refugees are coming, as you know, with huge experiences, and those experiences which we can't even imagine. They are here. We wanted to do some work for those men in terms of gender justice here in Calgary. What we did is, In Pashtun culture, there is and I use the same word there is a institution, I would call it, in which men sit together in the village. There's a play, there is a tree and a place, and there's a typical, it's a beautiful place, but only men goes there. Men will sit together when they come from farms and they will talk. They will have, like talk, chit chat, but in that, they will talk about their social issues. They will sing, they will story, they will eat, they will talk about social issues. And then elders, and they will come together with a decision on many things. And decision is so clear, everybody has to follow. It's a huge, I'm writing a full article on just this institution, which is called Hujra, 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 it's also online. So I don't want to go, we don't have time for that. But I said, okay, every Pashtun knows what is Hujra. When you say Hujra, they know the whole thing, what is Hujra and what's happening in Hujra. It's in their blood, I would say, to make it simple. So here I said in Calgary to Pashtun man, oh, why don't we have Hujra in Canada? So we did Hujra in Canada. So we provided through a community organization a Hujra kind of environment. Floor, we're sitting on the floor. Afghan pulao, I don't know if you know about that rice with that spicy rice, and it's not biryani, by the way, it's very different. So Afghan pulao, kebab, Pashtun music, Pashtun, and I told them, you're gonna come in Pashtun dress. Every man is coming in Pashtun dress. We all sit together in a typical Hujra kind of environment. But I had a purpose. It's not just Hujra for fun. We had fun, stories, music, all that. And it continued, they love it. Oh, you wanna go to Hujra? And then I said, okay, I have a question from you. What does it mean to be a man? Right? Then I said, what? Maybe somebody asked me, what does it mean to be a man? And I had flip charts. I had a plan, right? And then I said, okay, you just tell me. And everybody's cheering. Brave, strong. A man won't cry. He will stand with his family. Sacrifices. You know, like, and all those things, right? They use the terms ghairat in Pashto, right? Dignity, powerfulness. Lots of things. And then he won't cry and all that. He said, okay, we start about talking. And can you share stories? Just to make it stories, make it brief. Finally, is it helpful not to cry? Is it helpful to be not showing emotions? And we started talking about it. And the one man said, I never touched my dad in my life except once when he was dying. I took him on my shoulder to the hospital. Touching your son, your daughter, a man, not touching. It was not. Anyway, so we spoke about it, but it was the first step. And the same man who said a man won't cry, when he starts sharing, and then we make an environment about it. When he starts sharing about his story, about his father, he cried. What does it mean to be a man? And so you want to be a man like this in Canada? You want your children to be like this? Anyway, then we build on it. Then they say, can we have another Hujra on this? And then we start having some practitioner coming, I said. One of my great friend, who is a great mental health practitioner, he start coming. And then they say, can it be a woman Hujra? And they start getting help. It transformed masculinities for them. So that was a Canadian context. Sorry, I'm just trying to shorten the thing. And then we had like 6, 7 Hujras because they wanted it. And this is the example of it. How you begin with local context, using local language, local food, right? A local environment, and transform for a positive social change. Here, in Calgary. Second question, in terms of time, I'm a bit cautious about it, sorry. Second, you said about in this situation in Afghanistan, you said about challenge. So I was about to say which one, right? So many challenges there. I go there, as I mentioned, I have those organizations there for Canadian Association for Children Education in Pakistan. I go there every year or 6 to 8 months for the social movement, village to village, engaging men. And we have now amazing young girls. Now some of them are graduated because this is a 10-year-old organization. And they send me letters now. Now we are graduated. Can we now support a little child? I say, wow. You just got a job after graduation. So this is how, so the challenge is there. Come to the point, is that I face, our team face, there are extreme views on both sides. Extreme views on religious, social, cultural side about gender justice and girls' education. But this is not just one challenge. This is the challenge of them. Now the challenge is also here. Not understanding those challenges. The disconnect is there, as I mentioned earlier. We need to have patience. We got here in 1920, probably, or later, women got the right to vote. In Afghanistan and Pakistan, it won't come like this, and we want it like this. We need time and patience and understanding the context is important. So the team and I facing challenges on both sides. One is on their side, from the community leaders in that way, they are, like in many cases, in the village and tribal areas particularly, they are not supporting the initiatives of girls' education. But on the other side, I also feel challenges convincing my other colleagues in the Western world that there are better ways of doing things. Policies can't be just made in boardrooms and applied in the field. We need to look into the field where the client is at and then make policies accordingly.
Thanks so much. I think that Bev and Paul had questions, but I'm gonna ask, maybe we could just do one question and see if there was anybody online. Just Donna, Rain, is there anybody? Okay, Grant. Okay, so yeah, Bev first, Paul next. No, okay.
Oh, okay. Dr. Jamal, forgive me, I may not have understood, but in the context of gender equity and gender justice, and I quote from you, unless a man stands up. Would you please tell us exactly what you're saying there?
But unless a man stands up, what I mean is that unless there is change in the perception, behavior, and action of men, the journey of gender justice is an uphill journey. So it's critically important that you work with men by taking into their context, understanding their context, and then build on that context. And unless there is, because there is a perception and about gender roles. Men has perceptions about it. Men has perception is what is a woman, just like man has a perception what it means to be a man. So unless the perception, the behavior, that attitude of there is no change in that, and when there is change, it means the man would understand it, the significance of gender justice. And then will become ally for his daughter. And when those men who understood it, their daughters did, as I mentioned the example of my grandfather, because his perception, his attitude, his understanding about his daughter was totally different than the rest of the village. when it was changed, because he realized that when I educate my daughter, they will be doing much better than the others. So get what I mean when a man stand, when he become ally. But he will become ally when he realizes it. I hope I kind of responded.
Thank you so much. So, just before we go, I just wanted to ask, Elisa and Gloria, the last thing that I wanted to ask was about, if there was one takeaway right now, because of your work here in Canada specifically, about your community approach or the work that you're doing that you wanted to share with everybody. No, it would be grand.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think for me, it's just understanding the intersectionality approach, reaffirming and recognizing the dignity and rights of all individuals that make a great impact in the work that we do with the Black 2S LGBTQ community. Yeah.
Just jumping off that, I think that regardless of our age and our race and our ability and our sex and our gender, there's always an avenue for allyship, especially when we're combating human rights violations and abuses. I think there's always a way to get involved.
On that inspiring note of shared humanity, thank you so much, all three of you, for sharing of yourselves and speaking about these topics and bringing all of who you are to this wonderful and impactful panel. So thank you everybody for being here. That's the end of our online programming. So thanks everybody online. I think, yeah, we'll all wave to you. And for folks, thanks, there's the camera.